I rewatched every single punt from the 2023 season so I can give you each team's best 5 punts and then rank each punter by their top 5 punts alone. Remember, it's just based off the top 5 punts from that season, so don't crucify me, because coming in at number 32, we had Presley Harvin from the Steelers. Now, while he was much more variant punt to punt than almost anybody else in the league, he did have some buttes. How about one game where he hit this little 55 to the 5, followed by a gorgeous 41 to the 1 out of bounds, which makes me tingle to even think about, and even had this better lucky than good punt that takes a gorgeous roll to go 61 yards to down itself at the 6. Now from here it'd be a while till we got a highlight worthy punt, but he has a simply gorgeous ball against the Packers with perfect direction and a healthy 5-yard bounce to net him 56 yards, which completely flips the field, and another nice bounce against the Rams to keep them at the 6-yard line. And you gotta think, if that's the bottom, we are only getting better. Coming in at number 31, we have Saints punter Lou Hedley, who showed off a full bag of tricks in his top 5, like he hit a pearl of a punt to stick inside the 5 against the Packers, and then against the Patriots, he goes one ball to the 5, it gets called back, so what does he do except hit another one to the 5, this time from 5 yards further back. He also was innovating the rollout game this season. It didn't always pay off, but it definitely did against the Jags, as he netted every bit of 62 yards to completely flip the field against them, and then a gorgeous banana ball to the 3, followed by a perfectly placed pooch punt to the 1 against the Bears. You have got to love it.
With an incredible play on special teams.
Number 30 on the list, we've got Ryan Wright, who comes out the gate with a 57-yard ball that takes a gorgeous roll to the 7. I know it's not how he drew it up, but that is the opposite of what happened on this 46-yard portal that most people couldn't have even thrown more perfectly to pin the Charger. And as we start to get our category of monster punts, Ryan launched one of those, a 68-yarder against the Packers, as well as forcing a muff against them to get the ball back at the 7-yard line. And it may not be the most exciting, but he just had a ton like these, so this one encompasses all of them. It's a forced fair catch inside the 20 at the 16 of over 50 yards. You're not going to do much better than that. And to take the number 29 spot, we're giving it to Jake Bailey, who definitely had an average season, but his top end was gorgeous. Check it out, 46-yarder to the 8, which was up in the air so long the coverage team and the returner didn't even know what to do. Follow that up with a 45-yarder perfectly placed out of bounds at the 5. And how about this 66-yard punt? The returner tries to take it out from the 2, doesn't even make it back to the 15, which pins them beautifully. And if you like big punts, you're not going to get much better than a 58-yard misdirection against the dangerous Kevontae Turpin, who gets down at the 2-yard line because he can't get to this ball. And as far as hangers are concerned, this is a 52-yarder, over 5 seconds of hang, taken at the 1, and was shortly returned to the 9-yard line against the Chiefs this year on an absolutely dominating stretch.
Booming punt sends Hardman back, and he fields it on his own 1. Oh.
Now at 28, we've got Bengals' own Brad Robbins, who comes out strong with a 49-yard beauty to take a bounce inside the 10-yard line with a phenomenal direction. Then moves the field around against the Steelers, making the return fair catch at the 8-yard line in the same game. How about this 57-yarder to the 1, gorgeous bounce, and just sits inside the 4-yard line. These punts were also enough to force the Chiefs returner to lose where he was at and field a ball inside of his own end zone, which was the first time that that's happened in a couple of seasons at least. And for his final trick, how about this 56 yards on the fly, forcing the returner to catch it as he steps out of bounds for the punting equivalent of the phrase nothing but net. Now we're breaking into the top 27, and we're going to start with Braden Mann for the Eagles, who opens us up with a 41-yarder that takes a hell of a bounce, as well as demolishing a 61-yard punt that does get a slight return. But you know who doesn't get returned? This gorgeous 55-yarder, perfect bounce back to the 10-yard line. And if you like that, here's a 52-yarder that checks back to the 12, and he doesn't just hit it far, because he can place it like against the Giants when he says, hey, if you want to beat us by 24, that's fine, but you're going to have to drive 97 yards to beat us by over 30, which they would not do.
Well placed by Mann. The Eagles get down the field.
At 26, somebody who punted well all season, but his highs weren't soaring like the guys above him in Tress Way. But that still includes this nasty 66-yard misdirection punt to pin the Broncos at their 10. And it should have been worse, but it was prematurely down. He also had this gorgeous 53-yarder to the 7 where he put the Patriots returner in such a rut, he lost 3 yards trying to make something happen. And in the short game, he had 2 solid pin punts against the Jets and Falcons to keep them inside their 10 all by himself, but a bulk of his film was just punts like this one I got against the Giants. 58 yards, no chance of a return because that ball was up there for 5.1 seconds, which is a solid top 5, but that's why it's a little bit lower on the list because everything above here is going to start getting a little insane. Now at 25, we do have the Colts' own Rigo Sanchez, who opens up with this gorgeous ball to keep the Browns at the 3-yard line, sending it straight to the gunner at the corner. Then against a full-out no-returner blitz, he punishes the Patriots by forcing them to start at their 17-yard line. In that same game, they keep the returner back there, but Rigo catches him slipping as he puts the ball out of reach to get a 43-yard punt to the 6 to pin them again. He also uses that same sort of misdirection technique to catch the Steelers returner slipping, who lined up on the right numbers and put the ball outside the left numbers to net 57 yards and force them to attempt to drive 90. And if you like the first punt I showed you from him, it wasn't the only time because he'd find that same gunner in the same corner again as Rigo shows that it wasn't just a fluke.
Perfectly executed. It's down by Chris Lamons. Nice punt.
Now coming in at 24, we had Riley Dixon, who was gonna get us some bangers, like a 33-yarder that gets muffed at the 5 for the Broncos to get their ball back against the Chiefs. He would also unload one against the Vikings for a humongous 63-yarder in the air that rolled for a mile if the end zone weren't right there, still giving us a 68-yard punt. He also had a nice forced fair catch at the 5, and if you like fair catches, how about this one? 56 yards, 5.15 seconds of hang, and some great direction to boot as he completely flips the field. But I saved the best for last because Riley, against the Raiders, drops the nose and the guard of the Raiders returner, who wasn't ready for this misdirection punt, resulting in netting every bit of 64 yards as that ball rolls to the 2. And to follow up that insane performance, it only gets crazier as Wheelan for the Packers opens up with another massive 68-yard missile that results for a touchback, and then against the Chargers, from backed up, completely flips the field, hitting a 61-yarder with a ton of hang to allow for some great coverage. But holy crap, did he just control the field in the short game. He pinned the Lions at their 1-yard line. Later, he pins the Chiefs at their 3-yard line, but against the Cowboys, he would only punt 3 times and would force the most dangerous returner in the league to leave the ball inside the 10 every single time. And when you watch all this returners film like I have, that is incredibly impressive.
Perfect execution by Green Bay.
Now, as we move into number 22, you're going to see things notably pick up in pace as we break into that middle of the pack highlights, because Trenton Gill starts us off with a pitch perfect punt that only could have been better by exactly 6 yards and maybe a better spot as it was marked at the 7. He also gave us this gorgeous 48-yard punt to be down at the 5, and look at this, 62 yards, phenomenal coverage to ensure there's no return as the returner tries to get his way out of the 9-yard line to no avail. He also had our longest punt so far with a massive 76-yard touchback, which nets 56, and every special teams coordinator is gonna love it. And in crunch time against the Packers, needing to pin them, he hits it high and true, forcing the fair catch at the 6. And if you think it can't get better, well, we still have 22 more. And 21, speak of the devil, is gonna make his way on the list in the name of Sam Martin by showing off some incredible control of direction as boom, 54 yards out of bounds at the 16 under incredible amounts of distress. He also hits a 70-yard touchback that was just a slightly different angle on the bounce away from being a much cooler highlight, but here we go because the angles are going to pick up in his favor this time. 48 yards out of bounds at the 3. How do you get better than that? Maybe let's back him up 9 yards. 57-yarder, no chance for a return as it bounces out at the 4-yard line. And last but not least, 53 yards down at the 3. So for a punter who barely gets to kick, he definitely makes the most of his opportunities.
And again, will maroon the Patriots deep in their own zone.
Number 20, one of the lesser talked about punters in this league, and it is now Steelers punter Cam Johnson when he played for the Texans, but he definitely needs more height than he gets because look at this 63-yard punt and name alone, because it was 65 on the fly but checked up back to the 7-yard line. And against the Panthers, he went from being backed up to backing them up by kicking it every bit of 74 yards in the air to start them inside their own 20 when surely they thought they were going to have great field position. He also hit a humongous humongous ball that was maybe too big as it went in for a touchback 69 yards down the field. But if you think he's all power and no poise, how about a 56-yard misdirection that couldn't be corralled to give them the ball at the 5, and a 45-yarder to make the Colts even more backed up than somebody who was on a cheese-only diet. Now, the first punter in the teens is going to be Brad Pinion, and here's the next cutoff where from here on out, every punter is just going to leave your jaw unhinged. He starts with a 55-yarder to the 5, and if that's not good enough for you, the returner decides to pin himself at the 1-yard line. Then against heavy pressure, he puts one out 56 yards down the field out of bounds at the goddamn 16-yard line with perfect direction, which is his MO, because against the Commanders, he does it again to net 52 yards, starting them inside the 20, and then from backed up, facing pressure, he has the Titans returner reeling backwards to get this ball 60 yards past the line of scrimmage with enough hang time that he only picks up a single yard on the return. Finally, Brad finishes off the number 20s with a perfectly placed out of bounds punt to the 4-yard line to ensure there is no funny business on this return.
As they are going to mark this football just inside that 5-yard line, 52-yard punt.
Next, surprisingly low on the list at 18, we have All-Pro and Pro Bowl punter Bryant Anger, whose highlights are good, but obviously he just had no lowlights, which is why he's at the top of the league. But he opens with a 45-yarder to the 2 against the Chargers, which is awesome. Follow that up with a 46-yarder that takes itself out of bounds against the Giants, and he also has a couple monster punts. How about a 59-yarder that is attempted to be returned, but the Commander returner gets tackled at the 3-yard line. He also hits this high, should have been fair caught punt, but the returner loses it in the light and gets a favorable bounce to ensure the Bills don't score at the end of the half. And then finally, all the way backed up, he just plays a perfect ball, no chance of a return, 57 yards out of bounds to start the Dolphins on their side of the 50. Then our last punter in the bottom half of the highlight pool, the bottom half, if you can even believe that, is Cardinals punter Blake Gillikin. He opens up humongous 66-yard punt that only gets a short return, which is good, but not as good as this perfect 57-yard punt. Takes a short bounce from the 3 back to the 4 to start the Browns in a tough situation. He also hits one heck of a misdirection punt, so the Steelers get backed up inside their own 10 to the 7 as he nets every bit of the 62 yards on that punt. And did I hear it's time for a new longest punt? Well, it is, because he uncorks 77 yards to net 57 on a touchback. And to show off a short game, how about this? Nice little 46-yard pin punt against the Seahawks to start them at the 2 in a very, very tight game.
And what a punt.
It's twice now.
Back in.
Now I present to you the top half of this list, kicking us off at number 16, Jordan Stout, who starts off with this bold misdirection from the back of the end zone to completely fool the Colts returner and their dreams of getting good field position, followed by some devious work. Like, look at this, 52-yard punt, pin those same Colts and ensure that they make no miracle comeback. He also played the corners better than your average jug dealer with a 51-yarder that goes out at the 4 against the Browns, followed by a 54-yarder out of bounds at the 8 against the Cardinals. But most impressively, in the conference championship game, he launches a 66-yard punt that's fielded at the 6 to set the Chiefs up to have to march 85 yards if they want to score in an absolutely clutch coffin corner punt. And at 15, we have the legendary Johnny Hekker with a slew of trick punts, like a 69-yarder with enough coverage that there's only a 4-yard return. He also shows off his banana punt brilliantly as he puts it at the 1 against the Bears, does the same thing to get it at the 4 against the Falcons on a 52-yard punt, and then again against the Saints as he's an absolute menace because you can tell the returners want nothing to do with this ball. But facing down an all-out blitz, he pulls out the pitching wedge and makes the Seahawks look silly as he gets the ball rolling on the ground and down at the 3-yard line to close out the half.
Bothell, Washington's own Johnny Hekker.
And at 14, I've got to throw in the guy who I played football against in college, Ethan Evans. He hits a different level on how far you can punt the ball, starting us off with a humongous 72-yard punt entirely on the fly against the Niners. He then shows off a little bit more finesse with a 58-yarder with a precise direction that pays off brilliantly as that ball bounces back to the 5-yard line. And the perks of hitting a ball this far constantly? Well, this one comes down a little shorter, but you can tell the returner is nowhere to be found, so he gets the bounce and pins pins the Browns at the 2-yard line. And you may wonder why the returner isn't close enough, and that's because sometimes he does stuff like this misdirection to go over the top of Gunnar Olszewski, who is reeling backwards and picks it up off the bounce to get it down inside his own 10, even after Ethan was kicking from his own goal line. And finally, I like big punts, and I cannot lie, so I'm putting this massive 68-yarder on there. Even though it resulted in a touchback, this is just an insane top 5 punts, but not as insane as another big leg, which is 13, Jamie Gillen from the Giants. First of all, when this man is backed up, he is dangerous, as he hits a 60-yarder with 5.15 seconds of hang, an absolutely insane direction to force the fair catch. He does the same thing again later, but 4 yards further, and it just puts the returner in such a predicament. All he can do is dance around before being tackled for a 3-yard gain. And I don't know why, but against the Cowboys, the returner was feeling a little frisky, so he decided not to fair catch this monster of a 56-yard punt and gets punished and forced to stay inside the 10. He also hit a massive 74-yard boot that leaves the returner just watching it go over his head, as well as a gorgeous 50-yard punt against the Patriots again, where this time he forces the returner to pin himself at the 9-yard line.
Had a 74-yard punt earlier.
Finally, to take us number 12, we had Bryce Beringer, former Michigan State photographer, who had some insanity on punts. How about this? 79-yard punt for our longest ball as it rolls in for a touchback, but who cares, we're netting 59. He also had a insane 64-yarder to the 6, which is return, but stays inside the 15-yard line. He also has some great short field and directional work. 46-yard punt out of bounds at the 2, as well as another gorgeous pin punt against the Dolphins to start them at their 4-yard line, where later that same game, he launched a 63-yard warhead to pin them inside the 20, so far out of bounds there was zero chance for a return. He also just hit a gorgeous 70-yard punt from backed up, where we were just a better bounce away from getting one of the best punts of the last decade. Now past 11 takes things to a different level once again, like with number 12, Ryan Stonehouse, who gets a gorgeous 62-yarder across the field out of bounds at the 13-yard line. Or how about this 64-yard missile that only gets a short return to pin the Falcons inside their 10. To also emphasize his massive leg, he hits a 72-yard touchback that was just pulverized, as well as a 73-yard touchback as his leg could not be contained by the 4 corners of the field. But that didn't mean he wasn't pinning guys, because he hits this gorgeous pin punt down to the 1-yard line, and he could even pin teams from further back, like when he was kicking from his own 10-yard line. You gotta be kidding me. And starts the Panthers from their 5, which if that isn't flipping the field, I don't know what is. And breaking into the top 10, we have 2022 All-Pro punter Tommy Townsend, who starts us off with a massive 53-yard punt with over 5.6 seconds of hang to force the fair catch at the 9-yard line. He also hits a beautiful pin punt to the 2, so hey, let's back him up 20 yards and see what he can do. Well, guess what? He cooks with a coffin corner to pin the Bears deep again at their own 2-yard line. And against the Patriots, what else can he do except get the bounce of the century down at the 1-yard line? But his best work in a tight match against the Ravens in the championship game hits this beaut to make a gorgeous check and easily be caught and fielded at the 1 in the 4th quarter. Just an insane play.
Tommy Townsend was first-team All-Pro a year ago with efforts like that.
At number 9, we get a guy who's a quieter player in this league in J.K. Scott, but his punt highlights are incredibly loud. He starts with a high-hanging 46-yarder that gets down at the 4-yard line, but we all knew he could control the short game, so what's more impressive but a disgusting 65-yard pin punt against the Chiefs to get them out of bounds at the 3. He also pinned the Patriots at the 5 thanks to another high-hanging pooch, this time from 54 yards out, and then would victimize them again with a 38 out of bounds at the 2. And he thought, well, 38, 83, what's the difference? And that's what he did with a 83-yard punt going end zone to end zone against the Broncos with the longest punt of the season. But number 8 gives us just some insane punts, because we got the Seahawks on Michael Dixon. Opens up with a 73-yard touchback, and trust me, it's far from his most impressive, because we also get another 63-yarder down at the 2-yard line and a 62-yarder all the way to the 5 that gets a very short return. But his directional prowess stands out with a 60-yard punt out of bounds at the 8, and then a perfectly placed 38-yarder to the 4 to round him out.
Let it bounce, and the Seattle special teams will down it
inside the 5.
Now breaking into number 7 is a guy who I think is more slept on than your average Tempur-Pedic mattress, and that's Corey Bojorquez. He had some freaking nukes. Let's start out. 69-yard punt on the fly to the 9-yard line to get a holding call and move the ball back for an effectively 70-yard punt to pin them at the 5. He also hits a humongous 72-yarder well over the head of the Cardinals returner, and it rolls all the way down to the 1-yard line. And this insane out-of-bounds punt didn't just come off of a 54-yarder, but a 65-yard city leveling punt that bounces backwards to the 16, and if it bounced forwards, who knows how good it could have been. But we know how good the next one is, as he sends the returner sprinting backwards to field it at the 19, keep going back, which is 72 yards before the returner tries to make some ground back and can't, as he's tackled at the 18. He also is pretty clean from the closer ranges as he whips out a 52-yard beautiful ball against the Bears out of bounds at the 2-yard line. What an insane top 5 from this guy.
2-yard line, a 53-yard punt, and obviously no return.
Now coming in at 6, we have the Lions' own Jack Fox, and he opens us up with a look at his short game as he puts the ball out of bounds with 2 with the precision an average fan couldn't walk down the field and get. He also just had a slew of punts like this, 61-yarder, 5 seconds of hang time off of an adverse snap fair caught at the 6-yard line. Don't believe it happens a lot? How about another similar one against the Saints where they tried to return it, but this time the coverage team has to work a bit more. Or when he does the same thing against the Rams as they get the fair catch at the 8-yard line, and he just does it a lot. He also hit a enormous 70-yard touchback and a high-hanging 55-yard punt that decides to stick around at the 2-yard line. But in the playoffs, this punt pissed me off because of how good it was, but he hits one every bit of 70 yards in the air, and it's taken a slow bounce that should have been down at the 1, but somebody on the Lions coverage team got a bit trigger happy and hit it into the end zone instead of giving us the best punt of the entire season. And I'm convinced if you don't touch this ball, it stays at like the 2 or 3.
And do they go in the end zone? Sure look like it. Let's see.
Now everything before now is pretty good, but the top 5 is on a different level with their highlights because none of them have just 5. Let me show you what I'm talking about with Jake Camarda at number 5. He has a huge leg, so naturally he opens up with a 75-yard punt that is 3 deep into the end zone, which if you've been keeping up is the longest punt in the air by at least 4 or 5 yards as it bounces into the stands. He also follows it up that same game with a nice short field punt to the 7-yard line, but against the Eagles he hits a humongous 73-yarder that gets fielded and returned, but had he gotten some better coverage, this would have been absolutely insane. And he was doing pin punts from the area where most punters are trying to hit a big ball as he launches a 65-yard punt out of bounds to the 4-yard line against the Lions. No luck needed because it's all on the fly. Followed that up with a 57-yard punt to the 1 that checks up to the 3, pinning the Bills, and then just another great punt against the Niners as he gets a phenomenal bounce for it to go 56 yards out at the 2. This is on top of another 65-yard rocket that manages to stay in the field of play at the 4, and he caps it off with a gnarly 74-yard piss missile that rolls in for a touchback.
64-yard punt for Camarda.
Now number 4 and 3 get a little silly, but we're going to start at 4, which is Mitchell Wishnowsky, and he showed total and utter dominance of the short field game. Look at this. Against the Steelers, he puts 1 down at the 5-yard line. Then, from further back, he puts 1 out of bounds at the 4-yard line, still against the Steelers, and you think that's not good enough? Well, against the Giants, he hits a 39-yarder out of bounds at the 5, with a pretty poor spot if you ask me, but then hits a 42-yarder to the 1 against the Cardinals. He also hits a 36-yarder to the 5 against the Cowboys before a banana ball to get down at the 1-yard line. Speaking of bananas, he does the same thing to the Seahawks at the 2-yard line. And now, how about a nice cheeky 55-yarder to be down at the 5 against the Ravens, and finally caps us off with a 43-yarder to the 2-yard line in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs for a season of just insane short field dominance. And as I'm editing, I realized I even forgot a gorgeous ball across the field to pin the Steelers inside their 10 one more time, as well as hitting a beautiful banana ball against the Jaguars that they just could not corral to get them pinned inside the 1. That's a total of 14 punts around the 5 or inside the 5. That is just insane.
Mitch Wishnowsky down to the 1. You
Can't do it any better than that.
Now, number 3 is eerily similar, but just a little better in my opinion, as Thomas Morstead opens us up with a 52-yarder to the 4 that bounces back to the 8, but the Chiefs get a holding call, so it moves them back to the 4, and notably, that drive for the Chief results in a safety. Then, he comes out and hits a 58-yarder on the fly that bounces out of bounds at the 6, and by the way, that ensuing drive results in a safety. Then later against the Falcons, he hits a 47-yard punt that gets easily corralled at the 1-yard line, where the ensuing drive results in a safety for him to directly contribute to a whole touchdown's worth of points thanks to his punting efforts. But that's not all he did this season, because against the Giants, he was going to be a monster 48-yard heat seeker down to the 2-yard line. Again, later that game, he hits a gorgeous 52-yarder that sticks at the 3-yard line, and if the Giants hadn't been punished enough, he comes out 43-yarder out of bounds at the 3-yard line. He was just the Giants' boogeyman that day. Now against the Texans, he also would come out and hit a 46-yarder to the 3-yard line, as well as later that same game hitting a 54-yarder to the 4 that ends up being muffed. And last but not least, he ends with a gorgeous ball that's every bit of 59 yards in the air that sticks at the 3-yard line. And I'd just like to add that every single one of these games had almost horrendous weather, which is what makes this all that much more impressive.
And another beauty by Morstead.
Number 2 isn't a guy who's up here for a bulk of punts, it's just the quality is through the freaking ceiling. Okay, AJ Cole at number 2 opens us up with a 53-yarder to the 5 that just sits there on its own, no help needed with a dash of great direction, but his directionality is why he's up here, because he's going to follow that up with a cross the field punt that goes 61 yards, bounces 2 yards backwards out of bounds to net 59 yards against the Steelers and start them at the 9. Then, against the Chargers, he goes across the field again with a 55-yarder that rolls 15 thanks to just how great the direction was to pin them at their 5 and net 70 freaking yards while kicking from the opposite 10-yard line. But his direction was just so insane. Like, these poor Packers had no chance on a 55-yarder that lands at what looks like the 2 but gets an aggressively bad spot to move them up to the 7-yard line. Against the Dolphins, he does the same thing, massacres a 62-yard punt out of bounds, giving the returner no chance to get to the ball and starting them inside their 15. And if you like big punts, he matches the longest of the season with an 83-yard missile to take that ball on a goal line to goal line tour, as we end with a 66-yarder where he's starting from inside his own 10 but pins the Broncos at their 11 with nothing they can do except watch it. Now that is how you become an all-pro, but not how you get number 1 on the list.
As AJ Cole's punt on a line goes 83 yards.
And with no further ado, the number 1 guy on this list, the illustrious, the slept on, the man who you should always let cook, Logan Cook. Where do we even start? He is just a conglomeration of everybody else's best work. Let's go with a 51-yard banana punt to start the show down at the 6-yard line. Then, when taking on the Falcons, he comes out and hits another banana that the Falcons didn't want any business with to get it to the 6, as well as a high-hanging perfect direction punt that forced a fair catch at the 13-yard line while traveling 59 yards in the air against them, as well as pinning them at their 7-yard line out of bounds, giving them no shot at making a return. Against the Chiefs, he hits one so high James loses it in the sun and gets Jacksonville the ball back in the second quarter, and in the third quarter of the games, he gave James no such option as he pinned one 57 yards out of bounds at the 5. Then, game on the line against the Bills, he puts a banana so deadly in the sky it gets muffed and almost wins the game immediately for them, but still forces them to drive 94 yards in 20 seconds. He also put the Saints inside their own 15-yard line with no chance of a return on a 53-yard dagger, and the very next punt was perfectly placed 54 yards down the field that takes a bounce to stay in bounds but be fielded at the 7. He also played the short game as he stifled the Steelers at their 2-yard line, but his direction game was actually unmatched this year as he hits another dime out of bounds to the 13. We'll throw in a 44-yarder that goes out of bounds at the 10, a 40-yarder that goes out of bounds at a 5, and a 52-yarder banana that comes down so deadly the returner just gets out of the way as it rolls to the 10-yard line. It was easily some of the greatest top and punting I've ever seen, but let me know who you think I got right, who did I get wrong, who's in the right place, who's in the wrong place. As always, have an amazing day, consider subscribing, and peace.
That's the leg that Ryan Stonehouse, the #1 punter in the NFL, has.